This is the lesson 2.6 homework help video. There are some tough topics in this lesson, so I picked a couple out. First of all, the floor function graphing. And the best way to handle these is to, like always, do an XY chart. If you plug in -2, -2 minus 2 is a -4. Absolute value does nothing with that, or excuse me, the floor function does nothing with that. And again, this is not an absolute value symbol. It is a floor function. If I plug in -1, we get a -3, just like it should be. If we plug in a 0, we get -2. Plug in a 1, we get -1. And plug in a 2, we get 0. And one more for good measure, plug in a 3, we get 1. Now, ta-da! All right, I put this graph on here to help us graph it. If we plug -2 in, we said we get -4. Plug in -1, we get -3. Plug in 0, we get -2. Plug in 1, we get -1, and so on. So we get this pattern like this. But the question really is, what do we get if we plug in decimals? So let's plug in, we really only need to plug in one decimal to see what happens. So let's pick something nice like 2.5. So 2.5. All right, actually this way. Let me take that off. It's not going there. I'm going to plug in 2.5 in between there. Now if we plug in 2.5, we get 2.5 minus 2, which is 0.5. Now the floor function, if I were to graph it this way, this is another way to write it, means it takes it down to the next integer below it. So that would make this 0.5 become 0. So here's your answer there, 0. So at 2.5 right here, it's 0. What that tells us is that everything in between 2 and 3 will give us a 0 value. We have to maintain the function, so therefore it has to pass a vertical line test. So we put a circle underneath this solid dot. And that's the pattern we will have throughout. It'll be a solid dot, line, circle, and so on. The official answer for this one is down below this. I look at it. This is indeed what we have. So at 2, we have a solid dot, line, circle. Next question, similar, so let's do a XY chart. Alright, so let's plug into this one. Let's say -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. We plug in -2. The floor function does nothing to an integer. It just keeps that -2. Take that times -3 and we get -6, or +6, excuse me. Plug in -1. Nothing happens with the floor function, so -1 times -3 gives us a +3. Plug in a 0, we get 0. Plug in a 1. 1 times -3 is -3, and 2 times -3 is -6. Now if we plot these points, we have -2, 6, which I won't graph. We have -1, 3, right there. 0, 0. 1, -3, and then 2 is -6, would be about there somewhere, I suppose. -2, +6 would be up here somewhere. All right, what happens between, though? That is the question. So let's plug in 0.5. So right here we plug in 0.5. What do we get out? Well, the floor function, when I plug in 0.5, will make it, or rather turn it into, a 0, because it rounds it down. Take it straight down to the next integer below it. So we get 0 out. So at 0.5 we get 0. So now we have a pattern again. And that pattern is solid dot, a line, circle, solid dot, line, circle right above the next one, solid dot, line, and a circle, just till you get above the next dot. And this represents our for function for this one. And again, the answer key is right here, so let's check that out. And this is what we have. Now let's try this function. Now this is a piecewise function, so we have to approach this one a little bit differently. This is like a normal graphing problem, except we have to be careful what zone we're in or what area of the graph we are in. Now it is very important to understand that this represents y equal to -1, and I'll use different color for the next one, y equals +1. Y is equal to -1 when we're talking about x less than -2, and it's equal to 1 when we're talking about x values being less than, or excuse me, greater than 2. Now what that does is it takes your graph and separates and says that, well, anything less than -2, so basically this point and to the left, all right, not including that, of course, but to the left of that, we are looking at y equals -1. When we're looking to the right of 2 on the x-axis, so basically here and to the right, we're looking at the function y equals 1. So if we graph the red one first, we would say from this point on and to the left, we're going to graph y equals -1. So we go down to -1, and from this point, and I have to go circle, because it does not include -2, and I go left at -1, because that's a horizontal line. But if I'm talking about values of x that are greater than 2, in other words, this point and to the right, it has y equals 1 for an equation or function. So I find y equals +1. Again, I have to put a circle there because it does not say greater than or equal to 2. And I go to the right. And that represents the function for this piecewise function. Now, domain and range here are interesting. The domain, well, all the x's less than 2 work, -2 work, and all the x's greater than +2 work. So in other words, this is our domain then. We'll only plug in things that are less than -2 and greater than 2. Our range, well, the only thing we get out of this is a value of y equal to +1 and y equal to -1. We don't get any other types of y's out. Let's take a look at one more like this, which is a great question. So let me get this ready. I'll be right with you in a moment. Well, this one has the same idea, but we have different separations, so let me write it out this way. We have y equal to -1 when x is less than or equal to -2, y equals x when x is between 2 and -2, and we have y equals -x plus 1 when x is greater than or equal to 2. So if we separate that, we have a division at -2, we have a division at greater than 2, and then we have something in here as well. So we have here y equals -1, over here y equals -x plus 1, and in the middle we have y equals x. All right, now the graph of y equals -1, all right, well, that's a horizontal line, so I go at -1 at, it is less than or equal to -2, so it's a solid dot in left. In between, it's y equals x. So let's use this color for this one, right here. And I have 0 for an intercept, a slope of 1, down over 1, And I go on until I get below the other function, y equals -1. And since there's a solid dot at that point for that one, I cannot have a solid dot below it. So it's circle. Therefore, you see why it's just less than. It's not less than or equal to. Up here, again, slope of 1, so you go up and over 1. I have to put a circle as well, because there's just a less than symbol here. And that is my piece in that interval. And then let's do blue for this one right here. Now this one has a y-intercept of 1. Now I'm not going to need this, but I'm going to put it on there just to help me graph it. Slope of -1, so down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, etc. Now I cannot, this graph, this piece of the function only works when I'm talking about values that are greater than or equal to 2. So I'm going to start here, and my line's going to go like that. And I used it to help me graph, but this point here cannot be allowed in that area. So I have to take them out. But I used it to help me graph it. And then this represents the piecewise function, where the domain, well, everything's covered to left or less than or equal to -2, between -2 and 2, and greater than or equal to 2. So it's all reals. The range, well, we have on this side, on the left side, it's only going to be -1. In between, in the green, you have everything from -2 to 2. And then to the right of 2, it goes down forever. Okay, so down this way means all y's that are negative, basically from that point on, are going to work. So we know that from -1 and down, we're good. That's all covered. Basically from this point on down, all the y's are covered, right? But we also have y's that go up to 2. From here to here, there's y values, and nothing up here for y's. So it would be better to say that y is less than or equal to 2. Because from this point down, we got all the y's covered when you put it all together. So for all three functions, from this point down, your range is covered. So y is less than or equal to 2. Let's check that real quick. Make sure we got the right answer. And that's what we have. So domain is all reals, and y is less than 2. And I'm looking at this piece right here. And that's it. I hope it's helpful and it gets you through some of your assignment. And I'll take more questions later.